Welcome to the You, Me, and BTC Podcast, episode 24. Today's show is all about the what-ifs. We reached out to the community for some hypothetical questions, and we'll do our best to respond over the next hour. What would happen if an entire nation adopted the cryptocurrency? What would happen to Bitcoin if World War III began? Are Bitcoins or Dogecoins better at fighting? Stick around for an informative and entertaining episode. Your hosts are Tim Baker, John Stuart, and myself, Daniel Brown. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 24 of the You, Me, and BTC podcast. We are recording on Monday, June 9th. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I am Daniel Brown, and I'm here with the best co-hosts in the world, Tim Baker.
Hello.
And John Stuart.
Hey.
So, we have a pretty exciting episode planned for today. I had this crazy idea last week about hypothetical questions where we kind of just went on the forums and asked some people for some crazy questions, both realistic and a lot less realistic. You'll see what we mean by all that pretty soon. But before we get started, we do have a really exciting announcement. I mean, we might have mentioned it here and there, but this is our main announcement. And we are really excited. At least we are. Hopefully you are too, but I don't know. Maybe you don't care. So
get to meet Daniel in person, everybody.
Well, yeah, if anybody wants to. Yeah, so here it is. So everybody knows what we're talking about. We are going to the Bitcoin in the Beltway conference it's in really just about a week, at least from the time you'll be hearing this. So it's pretty soon. We are extremely excited. We have plans to interview Jeffrey Tucker and Jason King at least, but we are definitely hoping to hook up with some other people as well. There will be a lot of big names there. We are just extremely excited, even just to see people and listen to them talk. But, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to bring as much content as we can to you guys as well. So, we also, for that trip, got some fantastic sponsors. First, we got APIcoin.io. We had him, the creator, his name was, or at least his pseudonym was Guido. And we had him on the show several episodes ago to talk about his service, APIcoin. And it's really awesome. It has a lot of cool features. It's basically, it's an API for Bitcoin. And a lot of times we compare it to blockchain because blockchain has an API. That's what it is in a lot of ways too. But APIcoin has some really important differences, which if you want to know what those are specifically, you can actually listen to that old episode. It's episode 16, and that's pretty interesting. And the creator, Guido, he's been into Bitcoin for several years, at least 3 years or so. And so he really knows what he's doing, what he's talking about. He's a great entrepreneur, awesome guy. So please check that out, and we also want to thank him and APIcoin for the help they're giving us.
Thank you, Guido.
Yeah, huge thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing. And our second sponsor, another really awesome project, it's called Monero, or it could be Monero. We're not entirely sure, but it's Monero. And the idea is that it's a cryptocurrency, but it's a lot more anonymous. And we've seen in Bitcoin really just over the past few weeks, a huge jump I'd say weeks and months. We've seen a huge jump in the demand and kind of the work around anonymity with Dark Wallet and Dark Coin. And this Monero is another example. It's based on a really innovative and, again, anonymous protocol called CryptoNote, which we'll be exploring all these ideas over the next few weeks or so. We've only recently gotten into the coin a little bit, It's a really awesome idea. We're going to explore it ourselves and share as much as we can with you guys. But you all know, if you've listened to the show before, you know that anonymity is extremely important to us. We need that in the cryptocurrency space, and Bitcoin has it to an extent. And there are ways to improve it, with CoinJoin and whatnot. But we absolutely support anonymity, and Monero is really a great step in the right direction for those ideas. So,
well, I guess we can say another thanks. It really means a lot that people are willing to support three chumps like us.
Yeah.
Give us the chance to do something this awesome.
Absolutely. And I guess real quick, I would say, especially from these two sponsors, we're grateful, but just the idea that this whole project began, I don't even know what I was doing. I had this dumb idea to start a WordPress and make an article about who knows what, and I thought somebody would read it. And I don't know why I thought anybody would ever want to read what I have to write. But the whole idea that it has evolved into this amazing, educational, exciting project and I mean that for us, and hopefully that's it for you too, but it's been amazing to grow this much, and the idea of having sponsors like this is kind of a sign of that growth and a sign of kind of what we're becoming. And yeah, it's just, I don't know what else I can say other than it's amazingly exciting. So
thank you to sponsors, those two especially, and also just to anyone who takes the time to listen to us.
Yeah, thank you. That's apicoin.io. That's their website. You can go there. And it's monero.cc, monero.cc, if you want to look either of those up. And I'm sure we'll be exploring both of those projects and sharing a lot more with you over the next few weeks.
Yeah, Daniel had the idea last week at some point. I guess he posted on the Bitcoin Talk forums on June 3rd, 2014 at 4:15 a.m., according to whatever time that's on. But we were kind of just looking for something fun to do with the podcast, something, I guess, just to get people maybe more interested in it. He just asked people to basically just throw any hypothetical questions they had regarding Bitcoin. And like Daniel said earlier about that, these range from like actually serious questions to things like involving Bitcoin-sized Dogecoins or something.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit weird sometimes, but just the two he had on here were of a wild question. Of one of the more weird questions was, what if Bitcoins were actually digital unicorns waiting to be released in the world? And I hadn't read that until now, and that does sound. And a good example of a more serious question, how would people use Bitcoin differently if there were to be 21 billion coins instead of 21 million? Which, I mean, that might be something we could talk about. I don't know how much we could talk about it besides just that I think it would be different, definitely, but I don't know why, or not. I know why there's just more, but like I don't know if that would mean that they'd be less valuable. I guess that would mean they'd be less valuable. Just right. Because there's more supply there.
Right, yeah, each one, I mean, a single unit, I guess, would be less valuable. And I guess psychologically, people have talked about this before, how even the way it is now, you can see psychologically, the whole idea of a Bitcoin being worth $650 or whatever is kind of confusing to some people. And so people say we should switch to millibits, or people say we should switch even farther. And so, yeah, you can see kind of psychologically how the size of a unit or the value of a unit affects kind of how people see the currency and how they spend it. And with Dogecoin, that's been a really big thing because the supply of Dogecoin is a whole lot bigger. I don't know what the exact number is, but yeah, it'd be like 21 billion instead of 21 million. It has a much larger supply, and people have said that that kind of makes people more willing to just tip around and give out little bits here and there, because I could give you 20,000 Doge and it doesn't take a bit out of my wallet. And so people have said that it makes people slightly more generous, maybe slightly more willing to spend, and I could see that, but I don't know. Guess there could be drawbacks too. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But I guess also, if you wanted to, I think you could make the argument that fundamentally, and that's what a lot of people that I respect will say, that the only thing that matters long run in any kind of financial thing is the fundamentals. Any kind of market or anything, you can manipulate as much as you want, but the fundamentals will eventually take over in time. And I think fundamentally, there would be zero difference. I mean, it doesn't matter how many units there are. It's just the market sets the price. And yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say other than I think fundamentally it really doesn't matter. So,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so I guess just to finish up, that was the original post. That was our example of a question, but we got some really exciting submissions from other people as well, which they're the same way. Some of them are like really strange and some are more realistic, and we wanted both of them. We just for fun, we were going to talk about some really stupid stuff just because it's entertaining. But we want to hit some more realistic stuff too. I would say if we can, we should try and alternate just so we don't get carried away on a question that really isn't that meaningful. So yeah, we'll do our best and we'll just pick some kind of at random, or not really random. We'll just pick whatever is our favorites and get started.
Well, I guess I'll go with this one. This is kind of a more serious one. Actually, I think this is the one that you might have said is not really hypothetical.
Actually, no, that's a good point. That's something I should mention. In the original post, I said that I only wanted questions that are strictly impossible. I said I don't want questions like what's going to happen when the Bitcoin reward halves, because that's really going to happen, and I don't know why. I just felt like saying let's do truly hypothetical questions.
That's been asked so many times. I think you mostly just wanted just some new stuff.
Right. But I was going to say, a lot of these questions are kind of unknown. They're like, well, what if this happens? And it really could happen, or maybe it never will happen. So I would say we'll just relax our definition and just pretty much, I think we'll be okay with whatever anybody submitted. So yeah, don't worry about it. We'll just pick questions, even though some of them might not technically be hypothetical. We'll just take what we have.
All right. Yeah, I'm just going to go with this one. This is pretty easy to answer, and we've talked about it quite a few times before on the show. Yakamoto said, would it be possible for another altcoin to overtake Bitcoin within the next 5 years in terms of value and available kiosks to use it? I would say absolutely. We've talked about this many times on the show. If you've listened, you know that. And our position generally is that if that happens, it would actually be a good thing, because whatever it is probably better than Bitcoin. So I don't really have much else to say about that. You guys?
Actually, I think that's a good thing to follow up with this whole dark revolution that is starting to sprout, like I was just saying with Darkcoin and Monero and things like that. Because those are some of the first coins that I've seen that truly have something new to offer. There are tons of altcoins out there that, so they have a shorter block time, or like we were saying, they might have 21 billion instead of 21 million. But like I also just said, fundamentally that makes zero difference in my head. At least the idea of having more coins doesn't fundamentally make a difference. The idea of a shorter block time, I suppose, could be beneficial and things like that. But I guess what I'm saying is, really, a lot of these altcoins, I don't think offer a significant benefit. At least not significant enough to overtake Bitcoin until this whole anonymity thing. But here's the thing. This is something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. I guess I don't really know this for sure because I'm not really a developer and I don't know how all this works. But I guess I'm wondering, what if the functionality of all this anonymity could be built into Bitcoin? And that's something I just don't really know the answer to, but do we need a separate coin, or can we build or add anonymity on top of Bitcoin? I would tend to say yes, we can add enough anonymity to Bitcoin because that's what a dark wallet is. It's on top of Bitcoin. It's not a different coin. So I would say, will a different currency really be able to overtake that? Or will we just figure out how to put anonymity into Bitcoin? And that's an unknown, but it's something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need the altcoins just because, like, everyone, I don't know if everyone always says, but a lot of people say it's a place where you can test out stuff, see if it works, see if it's going to crash, see how it supports everything. And I know I'm not using any of these words technically correctly because I'm not a developer either, but I think we need the stuff, like we need the alternative currencies, and even if they're not set up specifically to just test this stuff, I think they need to be there. If you're someone who wants to, who's really keen on having Bitcoin continue to be the strongest thing, I think you need the altcoins, so that, like I said, you can test out everything, because most of those altcoins will have, their market is a lot smaller. So if they get messed up, like, I mean, some people are still going to lose a lot of money, but it's going to be, the fallout from that is going to be a lot less than if Bitcoin, if you're trying to put something new into it, and then somehow that messes up the code, that's going to be, I mean, huge. It's going to be, I don't know if I want to say world shattering, but that'd be like a huge amount of money then lost, or then at a lot of risk.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely true. And we've always supported altcoins for reasons like that. And I think you're right in saying that that's what a lot of other people say too. It's a place to experiment, and
yeah,
there's a lot less risk there. Yep.
Then too, like I've said before with the altcoins, like if an altcoin is going to overtake Bitcoin, I'm fine with that, because with all the infrastructure that Bitcoin already has, that altcoin has to be so much better than Bitcoin. It can't just be a little bit better. It can't just be like, what were you saying, a faster block rate?
Yeah, block time.
Yeah, sorry. But it can't just be that, because that's not worth enough. That's not worth a bunch of people switching from all the Bitcoin ATMs that are out there, all the Bitcoin exchanges, everything that everyone has done to give some structure to the Bitcoin economy. It's going to take something that's like light years, at least in my opinion, light years ahead of Bitcoin to really, unless Bitcoin has like a fatal flaw that's found in like the encryption stuff, or if the government breaks that encryption. Yeah, I mean, we could go right into there's a question, it's from the Grubels from the Bitcoin OTC IRC channel. You posted this, Daniel, in the forum thread. There's two questions. What impact would a flaw in SHA-256 have on Bitcoin? And
well, let's just start with that one, just kind of as a follow-up to the whole idea of an altcoin. That's a really important thought, because encryption can be broken. I mean, as far as we know, the only way is by brute forcing it, which is basically just continuously guessing random numbers until you find the right one, which with 256 bits, that would take, I don't know any exact numbers, but hundreds and hundreds of years, even with a ton of computers. So, as far as we know, it's not broken right now, but you never know. There could be techniques or innovations or anything could come about, and people could say, hey, wait a minute, we can break SHA-256 with this method, and instead it'll only take us 1 year, or maybe it'll only take us 10 minutes to figure out how to decrypt messages or whatever. So that's something to think about. I would think that's a pretty safely a hypothetical question right now. But yeah, what would happen? It would be bad, clearly, because people couldn't really use Bitcoin anymore. But what I've heard is that the community just could pretty much, they can switch algorithms if necessary. Now, unfortunately, that causes a hard fork, which is a really interesting concept that I think we actually were going to talk about today. One of the questions is about that. But yeah, you could switch the algorithm, and maybe then we could use one that's not broken, and we could maybe continue Bitcoin. But I don't know, that would be pretty tough. If they broke SHA-256, that would be detrimental at first, because who knows what they could do with transactions, or who they could send coins to, or how many coins they could steal. And then if we did fix it, one of the hardest parts would be, if we did switch the algorithm, do we keep all those illegitimate transactions on the blockchain? Like, say somebody was stealing coins because they broke the algorithm. Do we keep the way the blockchain was after those bad transactions happened? Or do we try and figure out which ones were real or illegitimate and roll back the blockchain? It's really tough. I don't think enough people would ever be able to agree on rolling back the blockchain, or how far to roll back the blockchain. I don't really think that would be feasible in terms of just getting people to agree. But that would hurt then, because that would mean a ton of coins would be in the wrong hands, and there's not really anything we could do about it. But theoretically, we could still let Bitcoin chug along on a different algorithm. So actually, since we're talking about the whole idea of a hard fork, that's something that's been actually kind of bothering me recently. Just something I've been thinking about, because we've said, and I think it's basically true, that Bitcoin requires basically 100% consensus, and it's a tough topic to talk about what exactly counts as a vote, and are the miners doing the voting, or are the full nodes doing the voting? Could it really even be considered voting? We were talking about, we didn't really discuss it much, but we just mentioned those difficulties during our virtual meetup a couple episodes ago. And I was just thinking, I guess over the last week or two, a hard fork is really a tough thing to think about, because one of the main reasons for me is because basically I think if the developers decided on a whole bunch of improvements and innovations, which actually, that is kind of what's expected to happen at some point. They're going to make some fairly big changes, and there's going to have to be a hard fork. And that's happened in the past too, but basically what happens then is you get an altcoin, and basically everyone agrees and switches. They download the new client or the new miners and whatever, and people switch over to these new rules or the new protocol. And I guess it just kind of bothers me that the rules can be changed, that they're not set in stone. And what if the developers thought up this great improvement, did a hard fork, and there was problems with it? Or I guess the developers could go rogue too and intentionally introduce really bad changes. But unfortunately, I think no matter what the developers say, a very significant portion of the community is just going to be like, oh, hey, there's a new wallet update. I'm going to download it and run the update. And they're hardly even going to give it too much thought. And I don't know. I feel like that's kind of risky. I guess we really do need updates and improvements, but I don't know. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, that might be true, but I think at the same time, especially at this point where we're still kind of early in the development of Bitcoin, there are a lot of people who have a lot of technical knowledge and really know what's going on. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like people would figure out what's going on if something like that were to happen. There might be a bunch of people who are just like, oh, I'll just download this. And then, if a bunch of people do figure out what's happening, I'm not sure really what they could do about it, though.
Right. Just so to clarify things, well, first I want to say that question was from the user Medicine. I just want to try and credit people as much as I remember. But also, just in case anyone's not sure, I want to define a hard fork as best I can. Basically what it means is that if there are rules changed in the protocol that are not compatible with the old rules, then the only choice really is for everyone to switch over. And that's what a hard fork is. And theoretically, there could be some people left that are mining or operating a full node on the old fork. And that's why it's called a fork, because they split into two different directions and they're not really compatible. So that's why, for the most part, it's kind of like creating an altcoin. Now, the balance is, it's not like there's a whole new altcoin and the coins need redistributed or anything like that. The coins are still there, the addresses are the same and things like that. But it's kind of like an altcoin in that there are different rules, and so it's kind of like an altcoin. Let me read what Estenuno, I guess, Estenuno. I was just saying real briefly how the idea of a hard fork bothered me a bit, and he said it's almost surprising that there haven't been competing groups attempting to take over Bitcoin, so to speak. I'm sure we'll see some sort of conflict like that in the future. And that's kind of true. It's surprising that we haven't seen that in the past. And it's possible that maybe it's even inevitable that eventually one of these developers will decide to make a change and a significant group of people will disagree with these updates, and maybe it'll be split, say 80% just go on with the new updates, but 20% sit back and keep running the old fork. Now, kind of intuitively, you would say, oh, well, just the 80% wins and that's going to be the new Bitcoin. But I don't think that's quite how it would work. I think the 20% could kind of keep things running on their own smaller network. It would definitely be smaller, but there's no reason that they couldn't just keep kind of like a separate Bitcoin running in a much smaller 20% network. And that would just be a really confusing situation, especially because I think too, like the nodes would kind of still be communicating to some extent, but they would just be rejecting certain transactions. And I mean, I guess it depends what exact changes they made, but it's just really a whole complicated idea that sounds really bad. And I think it also is a real possibility too. So I don't know. That's definitely something to consider.
All right, we're going to lighten up the mood a little bit. BitcoinTalk.org user Biz, which is B!Z. That's how he spells it. He asks, would you rather fight a Bitcoin-sized Dogecoin or 100 Dogecoin-sized Bitcoins? I would definitely rather fight 100 Dogecoin-sized Bitcoins. How could you fight anything with Doge's face on it? You just can't do that. It's way too cute.
I think kind of logically I would actually disagree with you, because here's what I would say. A Bitcoin-sized Dogecoin and a Dogecoin-sized Bitcoin, I think logically those are pretty much equivalent. It's like, would you rather fight a really big small thing or a really small big thing? Well, that's pretty much the same thing. But unfortunately, it's either a single Bitcoin-sized Dogecoin or 100 Dogecoin-sized Bitcoins, where, I mean, if they're roughly equivalent, 100 is a whole lot worse than one. So I think I would actually rather fight one single Bitcoin-sized Dogecoin.
I see where you're coming from, but I just couldn't do it. Doesn't matter how logical it is.
I think I could punch a Doge in the face as long as it's just one. So I think I'll have to go with the Bitcoin-sized Dogecoin.
I guess I'm in the minority then. I have no shame about it, though.
I wonder what an actual Dogecoin, like what kind of fighting style would it have? I mean, I guess it would fight like a dog, but then what does a Bitcoin fight like?
Dogecoin uses quick attack. It's super effective.
Okay, here's one that's, I mean, some people would say that it's really wild, but I guess I could say there's other people who actually might think this could happen. So I don't know, we'll go for it. This is from Serenities. What would happen to Bitcoin if we all woke up to Red Dawn tomorrow to discover we're being physically invaded by China and Russia, who've had just about enough of all our shit? So, I guess, let's just say there was some crazy invasion, World War III, who knows what. What would happen to Bitcoin? That's something to talk about.
I just thought of this now. If there's like a World War III going on, I think Bitcoin would actually probably come under a decent amount of flack from the U.S., or from all governments, but like if we're talking about us here in the U.S., I think it would come under like a lot of, oh, this is for international trading, because I mean, as soon as it's World War III, then there's a lot of xenophobia, a lot of just, because you're just going to get all that propaganda. I'd say, like, because Bitcoin, so a lot of it's perks of it being international trading is to bring the world together, and anything like that, the powers that be or whatever don't really want to promote that. So I think it might, in a situation like that, there'd be a lot more clampdowns on it.
So you mean people would try to eradicate it more?
Yeah, either like heavily tax, or I could even see them like just labeling it as like unpatriotic behavior.
I can see people trying that, but personally, I think the value might go up, I guess depending on how severe the war was. But if people were saying, oh crap, I don't know what's going to happen to my country, I don't know what's going to happen to my money, I don't know what's going to happen to my leaders, I don't know what's going to happen to my family even, I think Bitcoin would really be a helpful way to go. I mean, it's not like it would like save your family's life or anything, but I feel like it would be a lot more secure just because it's decentralized. I mean, if I have dollars and America goes down, I don't really know what's going to happen to those dollars. But if I have Bitcoin, really the rest of the world doesn't matter at all. I just have Bitcoins. I mean, you could argue that the internet could kind of be at risk and that could cause problems with Bitcoin. And that's also a kind of a hypothetical question we could talk about. Like, if the internet was fairly significantly compromised, maybe as a result of a war like this, I don't know. I mean, I guess if it was actually compromised, I guess Bitcoin would really have no choice but to kind of fall apart. Because it really is dependent on the internet. I don't think there's really any, I mean, yeah, there's physical Bitcoins, but even they don't really mean much without the internet.
Yep. When I first started thinking about that, I was kind of leaning towards what Daniel said, but Tim, I think you had some good things too. I think you both have pretty valid arguments.
I wasn't saying necessarily that it would go down versus what Daniel was saying about it going up. I mean, you could argue that because they make it illegal, then the price would go up, but then I think it would drop first just because of people not getting it, but then as it becomes more scarce, I'm just thinking that just in general it'd be a lot more. I mean, it's already vilified, but they maybe even getting to the point where it's made illegal. And I mean, not that you can really force that too well, but yeah, I mean, it'd definitely be nicer than, same way that it's easier just to travel with Bitcoin, with any of these things that talk about just like trying to get out of the US with your money. It's kind of hard to get out with your precious metals because you have to carry them. And Bitcoin, you can kind of just go right through, and then you don't have to convert them or anything. It's just easy to use anywhere.
Yeah, it's just not dependent on government or banks or anything like that. You can take it with you anywhere. You can send it anywhere across borders, or even if there was a gigantic battlefield right between you and the person that you need to send money to, well, Bitcoin doesn't care. Unless the internet goes down, I guess.
Yeah, I think in a situation like that, that's like, Bitcoin is almost made to shine in a situation like that, but it would also probably be pretty dangerous to use for the stuff Tim was talking about.
Right, and we've seen in the past the Cyprus crisis I mean, that wasn't a war, but it was a fairly significant crisis, and I think a war would bring a lot of the same baggage, and that sent Bitcoin skyrocketing. So, yeah.
Yes, just to clarify, what happened in Cyprus was there was a bank holiday that was, I think, extended because the Cyprus government was looking at taking a percentage of every single person in Cyprus's savings accounts, I think.
Right.
They had to pay something to the EU for the EU to let them in, so then the EU could pay off some of their debt, or it was something like that. This is another one from Este Nuno. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm glad that you're listening, but I'm sorry. But he's got 4 here, which I'd actually like to cover. I mean, I like definitely 2 of them. Daniel, you might have better things to say about one of them. But first off, what would happen to Bitcoin if tomorrow we notice Satoshi moving some of his coins mined in 2009?
I think if he dumped them on the market, sure, the price would go down quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just him moving them, don't think it would make much difference. It'd be kind of interesting, kind of cool to watch, but I don't really think it would do anything. If he dumped them on the market, or I guess just him moving them might make people think he would dump them on the market soon, and that might trigger a sell-off or something like that. Sure, it could happen, but again, the whole idea of the fundamentals, I could see a price dip, but fundamentally, not much difference. It would come back eventually. And I don't think it would really be safe for people to discount those coins. I don't think it's really safe to just pretend, oh, Satoshi got rid of them or destroyed his private keys because he doesn't want people to think he has an edge on the market. And so maybe they are legitimately lost, but I don't see why anybody would assume that. I mean, let's just assume that he has them, and who cares? So maybe one day he'll dump them on the market. Who cares? I mean, that's something that could really happen, and why is that a bad thing? If somebody has that many coins and wants to sell them, sure, sell them. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, basically what Daniel says that, I think it, like, moving them, not just what would happen to Bitcoin, I think that might kick off another thing of trying to figure out who he is. I mean, I think it would reawaken maybe some interest in trying to find the person, but that wouldn't affect Bitcoin, like, protocol. I was mostly interested about these. I'm kind of just going to lump them 2 together because, I mean, they're kind of similar. But yeah, the first one is, what would happen if Bitcoin core devs started dying in mysterious circumstances? Well, he says, could Bitcoin recover from these losses? But do you think, what kind of effect would that have on Bitcoin? And then also, what happens if people, like, there's these large mining operations, and people are like, oh, well, we don't know if we really like the mining pools, and what if someone started trying to, not necessarily kill, like, the mining pool top people, but just use, like, bomb attacks to, I guess, destroy their miners to lower the difficulty, to maybe, like, level the playing field, and how would the miners respond to that?
Yeah, honestly, at the end of whatever I'm about to say, I think I'm going to come back to that fundamental thing and say it really wouldn't make much difference. But initially, let's say a bunch of core devs did die in strange circumstances. Yeah, I mean, people would be like, hey, what's going on? And sure, maybe some people would sell their coins thinking that something bad is about to happen. Maybe, but actually I don't even really think that would happen. I mean, so a bunch of people died. Okay, so a bunch of important people died. Bitcoin doesn't care who's alive or who's dead. It's a protocol. It doesn't depend on the core devs, especially now. I mean, there are so many other wallets that are not Bitcoin Core that don't need Bitcoin Core. There are different programming languages that it's written up in now. Yeah, there are so many development teams besides the core devs. But really, yeah, it's just so some people died. I don't want to sound disrespectful. Of course, I love a lot of those people. I don't want them to die. But for Bitcoin, yeah, I mean, not really that much difference. Now, I think it would, he said, if it was mysterious circumstances, I think that would make a little bit of a difference. I mean, if they all died of health problems and within about less than a year maybe, it could be considered more realistic. You might be able to say that they weren't really killed. And that, I think, would have zero effect at all if people were able to consider it pretty much natural deaths. But if it was mysterious, I think that would have a minor effect for some time. I don't really know what that effect would be. Maybe it would just be a bunch of strange media hype. Maybe the price would swing a little bit. But yeah, so I think the idea of it being mysterious makes a little bit of a difference. But in the end, either way, yeah, not much.
I mean, I think if something like that was happening, I think it could possibly scare off people, because you were saying there are so many other ones that aren't part of Bitcoin Core, but I think that could scare off people from a lot of developers. Like if, like a lot of them ended up just like all of a sudden, just people just started where it was looking like suicide, but it's like 8 people are doing it in a few months, and you're like, okay, none of these people, nothing was happening, so it's either they just found something, like they've just realized, or they saw something, or they have some kind of information that we don't have about Bitcoin, that like the encryption is, something is messed up or it's been broken into, or someone's killing them and is making it look like suicide. So I think that would definitely cause some developers to back off and back away from it, just to, I mean, because they don't want to die.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider and something I didn't touch on, because you're right. Some developers might say, hey, I don't really want to die, and developers are dying, so I'm not going to develop anymore. Yeah, that's true. But also, I think it shouldn't be too difficult for things to switch over to a more anonymous nature, because, I mean, that's what Satoshi's been doing all along. So if developers were dying, then just a bunch of anonymous developers might come into action or something. So, you know, like I said, like I guess that's kind of the same thing that I was saying. It might have an effect for a time, but in the end, I think it wouldn't have
fundamentals.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, what do you think about mining operations getting bombed? Whether or not it's to attempt to lower the difficulty, let's say that the difficulty gets lowered, how do you think the mining... he says, how would miners respond? I don't know if he's meaning the people building the miners or the mining pools or what.
Here's something that, this doesn't directly answer the question, but it's extremely relevant, I think. I saw just today, Andreas Antonopoulos was tweeting that he was not worried about a 51% attack really at all, because, well, first of all, just having 51% of the network does not constitute a 51% attack. You would have to actually exploit certain things to really gain. So that's one thing. But really, if a mining operation did this and was, even if they successfully executed a 51% attack, I mean, like if they bombed a bunch of other big operations so that they themselves could do a 51% attack, they really don't stand much to gain. I mean, unless they were just trolls who wanted to destroy Bitcoin, which I guess it's unfortunate, but those kind of people really are out there. They might just want to destroy Bitcoin, even if it really doesn't gain anything for them. And so, yeah, maybe Andreas discounting this completely is not completely legitimate, but still, it's worth mentioning that really they wouldn't gain that much. I mean, even if they took all the Bitcoins in the world, then nobody's going to trust Bitcoin anymore, so they're not going to be worth anything. If they took 50% of the Bitcoins in the world, then they're not going to be worth anything anymore. And so, okay, whoever holds the other 50% is probably going to lose all their value and all their money. But whoever did the attack is not really going to gain anything. But then let's say they did some real small attacks, like say they only sort of stole or misdirected 10% of the coins. So they make a couple $1 million or something. And let's say Bitcoin keeps rolling along with a few illegitimate stolen coins or transactions or whatever. I mean, okay, so you make a couple $1 million or even a couple billion. I mean, I guess at some point that's going to be worth it. But, I mean, bombing attacks, killing a bunch of people, making a whole bunch of people mad at you and upset, possibly devaluing Bitcoin such that whatever you gain is actually not worth anything or not worth much at all. And even the whole idea, everything that goes into planning an attack like that, and then, I mean, physically, like doing a bombing raid, and then also technologically actually executing the double spends or whatever you want to, however you steal the coins. Is it really worth it? Really? I mean, I suppose there might be a sweet spot in there where if somebody did it just right, they might end up profiting, but I don't know. I mean, it's just, if you have all that money to spend on bombs, why not just spend it on miners and get paid that way or something? I don't know.
I mean, I agree with you, and like that Andreas, I don't think you can just say that, I mean, though again, he knows a lot more about than I do, that you can kind of just throw it away, because like you said, there are people who, and maybe this is too expensive, but there are people who they just want to destroy things. And whether that could be anyone, that's just any bad actor in society, but also there are people who are just not very smart, and they can't.
Yeah, that's true.
They can't tell that they are, not that they can't tell, or they don't think about it long enough, or whatever. They're just like, okay, I know. Or it's like someone's like, okay, I figured out the sweet spot, and I know how to do it. And it's like, it's going to be incredibly hard for them to hit.
Right. Maybe this is what you were saying, but just another way of explaining it is that somebody could plan, yeah, I guess this is what you were saying. Somebody could plan this whole attack without considering the fact that if I steal 90% of Bitcoins, then they're not going to be worth anything. They might just not be smart enough, or they might not connect all the dots, or, I mean, that would be a pretty blatant mistake, but maybe they could make a more subtle mistake. They could make a more realistic mistake, and they might think that they're going to profit when they really wouldn't. So yeah, that's a reason that an attack could happen even though we don't think it would be profitable, is because somebody could make a mistake and think that it would be profitable. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Just that, like, a lot of crimes, when you look at them, and I have a caveat at the end of this, but a lot of crimes, whenever you look at them, it's like, couldn't you, not this, well, why didn't you just take all that energy you put into this, doing that, and just get a job? But, like, a lot of the crimes are just like, it looks like you spent a lot of money doing this, and you could have done something that would have just made you more money and wouldn't have sent you to prison. But I think we do have some comfort in that the kind of people who are going to be who would be trying to pull something like this are going to be smarter than your average, just your criminal, like, just because of the kind of thing they're doing, I'm kind of just going to assume that they're going to be more the kind of people who think stuff through a little bit more. I think that makes sense. Just because of what they're doing, I think they have to understand everything around it a little bit more, versus someone who just robs a house. They don't have to understand the house to be able to rob it, I guess. But if you're going to try to attack Bitcoin, you have to I would imagine you really have to understand Bitcoin. And anyone who's in that position is going to be so into it, is going to understand it so much that they're going to see that it's not going to be, or that it most likely won't be profitable for them.
Right. That's definitely important. But at the same time, I mean, a mistake is a mistake, and the definition of a mistake is, I mean, you could say that it's straying from what's obvious. So even if they are that smart, and even if it should be obvious how it shouldn't work out, a mistake is a mistake, and they could misunderstand things or misinterpret things and stuff like that. So you're definitely right in saying that that's another way of making it less likely, but it's not impossible, I guess.
I was just going to finish up that part with his last thing about if ghash.io was discovered executing successful double spending attacks on the network, would people still have faith in Bitcoin?
See, I feel kind of stupid for coming back to this, but if people discovered that, I mean, sure, people are going to be like, hey, that's a problem. People are going to leave the ghash pool. Then fundamentally everything's still fine. I mean, like really, I mean, yes, it will cause problems. It will be annoying. Maybe some people will lose coins or whatever. Okay, people figure it out. The problem is discovered. It ends, and Bitcoin rolls along just fine. And from then on, it would probably help Bitcoin because people would start to say, hey, I mean, and they already do this to an extent. Hey, this pool's getting pretty big. I should join a smaller pool. That would be good. And if an attack like that happened, then I think even more people would realize that they should be leaving the big pools. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if we're talking about fundamentals, then in the long run, I think that might actually help Bitcoin, because if it was a significant attack, it's only going to happen once, I think. Although you never know. I mean, history is always doomed to repeat itself, so.
I mean, I think we can assume it would be a long time before
right.
people did that again, but.
Yep. There's one more post that I want to get to. It has several questions, and we don't have to spend a ton of time, but I mostly want to talk about them because they talk about Butterfly Labs, and we like to mock them. And also, there's one of those really wild questions at the end. So, this is Question Authority. He's a hero member, so he's pretty well known, and that's a pretty cool name. I think we might agree with the concept, like questioning authority. Anyway, what if a country, any country, no matter how small, actually started using Bitcoin as its national currency? We could respond there, but I might as well read the next one and lump it together. Would the blockchain implode into a black hole from the massive amount of additional transactions? That's a really important issue that has actually been talked about really since the dawn of Bitcoin. The idea of a massively increasing transaction volume. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, Bitcoin doesn't really handle as many transactions as we would like it to, especially compared to credit cards and stuff like that. I mean, Visa, I don't know any exact stats, but they handle a ton of transactions every second. Bitcoin doesn't handle that many. And blockchain size, yeah, it's already, 15 gigabytes or something like that at least. That's not really the best thing. So it's something to consider, but it's also one thing that I think we should remember is there are ways, it's called pruning the blockchain, and that's actually in the original Bitcoin white paper. You know, this problem was anticipated, and there are plans to overcome it, at least for the blockchain size. I don't know about transaction volume. I don't know how easy it would be to, if a whole bunch more transactions were happening every second. That could get a little tough. I've heard some discussion recently about block size, which is at least based on the Bitcoin core, although some miners can deviate from this if they wanted to. But based on the Bitcoin core, each block is only supposed to be, I think, like 1 megabyte, and that can only include so many transactions. And I have heard quite a bit of talk recently about how that's going to be handled and if they should increase it and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, those are possibly problems, but I don't think we should be super worried because they are being considered already. They have been considered for a while. And I don't think we're going to hit any sort of pressure point for quite some time. I mean, at the moment, we're doing pretty well, so I wouldn't be worried about it yet. Maybe eventually it could become a problem, but even then I think it would be fixable. But see, also, his question is, would it implode into a black hole? And I think we can safely say...
So we're going to destroy the universe by creating a Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean...
Bitcoin's national currency.
I mean, yeah, clearly black hole does not come from Bitcoin. But even if he meant that as a way of saying, would Bitcoin fall apart completely, I don't think that would happen at all. Even if there was a huge transaction volume and even if all this stuff happened, I think it would just, so maybe the network would be a little slower. Maybe I would broadcast a transaction and it would take a day or two to get put into a block. But I don't think Bitcoin would fall apart. I think it would just have problems like that, so. And it definitely, at least in my mind, it wouldn't create a black hole. I don't know, Tim. Maybe you believe that it would. Let's get into Butterfly Labs a little bit. Those are his next questions. He says, would that country, whichever one adopted Bitcoin as an official currency and started using it a ton, would that country buy massive mining farms from BFL to secure its new currency? Would BFL make the country pre-order the equipment and finally deliver it after the country's government is overthrown, making the order useless? Yeah, that could happen. You never know. I don't even know if it's fair to just talk about Butterfly Labs because there are tons of mining companies out there that are having delays and everything. But yeah, I don't know. I guess if a country ordered an entire server farm from BFL and yeah, probably by the time it got there, the country would be overthrown and the order would be useless. I think I would say yes to that one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Would the country organize a 51% attack on the blockchain to overthrow all of the world's governments at once? Well, first of all, by the time the country had enough mining power to have 51%, they would be overthrown because Butterfly Labs would take forever. But maybe the next country would then get that. Whatever country overthrew them would get that mining order. And would they try to do a 51% attack? No, I don't think so because...
Not if they know what's good for them.
Well, no, it's not. I didn't really even mean for the same reasons. He says, would they do that attack to overthrow all of the world's governments at once?
I didn't really get that either.
If you're the only country that's using Bitcoin as a national currency, how is a 51% attack going to hurt any of the other countries at all? Like, it would hurt you the most. If it's your national currency and you do a 51% attack, all the other countries are going to laugh at you.
Well, unless by the time Butterfly Labs gets them, the equipment, everybody else has adopted it too.
Yeah. All right, so this is the very last question from Question Authority. Although actually there is one more, but you guys can look it up on the thread. It's crossed out, so... The last question we're going to do in today's episode, and this is actually, I think it's a really fundamental question for anyone that's into Bitcoin should really...
Fundamental.
Yeah, we've been talking about fundamentals all day, and anybody that's into Bitcoin should really be thinking about this question because it kind of will make or break the future of Bitcoin. I don't know, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. Tim, do you want to read it?
How many licks does it take to get the center of a Tootsie Bitcoin? And another stupid owl just always bites the thing, and then I don't know.
Or maybe it's 21 million?
Well, how do you think it would change if it was 21 billion?
That's true.
It'd be more like...
I don't know, each lick might be
shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you could do 21 billion shorter licks or 21 million normal licks.
What about a Tootsie Dogecoin?
Oh, that's true. But I don't really want to lick a Dogecoin. That'd be like hairy and nasty. So I guess it would take probably the same amount of licks. It would just take a lot longer because you would have to gag in between every single lick.
And you'd just be killing
what
a poor
happens
little
when,
puppy.
What happens when the lick reward halves?
Thanks for listening to episode 24. All of the music in today's show was from John Stuart. We'll see you next Thursday.